Last week I left you with a clue: what does Stephen Hawking and high school have in common? And the answer may just surprise you. Finally, I get to talk about quantum physics. More specifically, I'm going to explore the proposed alternate reality of Equestria Girls' Canterlot High universe, as well as that of all other alternate realities, the perspective of the quantum multiverse theory. As I will show, by looking at the prevailing theories of modern quantum mechanics, it is possible to conclude that the parallel dimension shown in the movie is not only possible, but certain to exist, and thus, if Equestria is the stand-in for Earth, it is perfectly logical that Canterlot High exists parallel to it. To do this, I will first have to explain quantum theory in its basic form. Now first a few disclaimers. I am not trained in physics past an A-star in physics GCSE. I'm not really sure what the American equivalent would be, but you complete GCSEs during the equivalent of your second year of high school. Suffice to say that my knowledge of the mathematics behind physics is basic Newtonian only, and I could not and will not explain the quantum theory through the relevant equations. Nevertheless, I have researched the topic thoroughly enough that I am able to relay the theory behind the maths rather than the maths itself, which for our purposes should be sufficient. Now we have that out of the way, let us get to grips with the basics of quantum theory. To do this, we must now look at the Feynman double slit experiment. The experiment is used to demonstrate the properties of light, or similar subatomic particles, as both a particle and a wave, a phenomenon known as wave-particle duality. The double slit experiment has been performed many times in history, with many variations, the most famous being Davison and Germer's experiment at Bell Labs in 1927. The basic setup for the experiment in each case is as follows. A light emitter, such as a laser beam, is set facing a piece of material, which has two slits cut into it. As the light passes through the slits, the path it follows is observed, in order to discern its nature in the following way. If light were comprised of particles, then we would expect to see just two thin, parallel strands of light going in straight lines from the slits. Instead, what we see is a pattern of light and dark patches, in other words, diffraction patterns of multiple waves interfering with one another. This result seemingly demonstrated that light was a wave. However, later scientists attempted to measure the path taken by the light by placing detectors at each of the slits, as well as using smaller particles like electrons. Upon repeating the experiment, to their astonishment, the diffraction pattern completely disappeared, and the light instead travelled through in straight lines like particles. This process was named wave function collapse, and introduced the idea that the act of observing the path of light or any subatomic particles somehow causes the route that they take to change from that of a wave to that of a particle. Mind-boggling as this is, it gets more complicated still. For a long time, no one understood why wave function collapse happened. This changed, however, with a revolutionary theory called alternative histories, proposed by Feynman. Feynman was interested in how an interference pattern could form at the quantum level when Newtonian physics had been demonstrated not to apply, since particles were not restricted to one certain route of travel in the double slit experiment. His answer was that, rather than taking one path of travel that can change randomly, particles at the quantum level instead take every possible path simultaneously between the emitter and the screen on the other side of the slits. The way this explains the interference pattern is as following. If a particle takes all possible routes, and there are two slits through which to go, then it will go through both of them at the same time. As a result, the same particle can interfere with itself. The strange process is called quantum entanglement, but it has deeper implications than just explaining the cause of the interference. The reason Feynman's alternative histories theory is so important is because they gave rise to the theory which this video is primarily concerned with, multiverse theory. Stephen Hawking writes, "One can also use Feynman's methods to calculate the quantum probabilities for observations of the universe. In this view, the universe appeared spontaneously, starting off in every possible way. Most of these correspond to other universes, while some of those universes are similar to ours, most are different. In other words, due to the nature of quantum physics, all particles involved in the creation of the universe took every possible path when creating it, giving rise to numerous dimensions and alternative universes, or more specifically, all possible dimensions and universes. Looking at Equestria Girls' Canterlot High from the perspective of the internal universe of Equestria, the way their universes started resulted in both universes evolving side by side due to the effect of alternative histories. Most crucially of all, Hawking notes the universes aren't just different in details, such as whether Elvis really did die young, but rather they differ in their apparent laws of nature. The quantum effect means that the subtle variations in the millions of particles gives rise to dramatically different macrocosmic physics. Our Newtonian physics, and a dominant humanoid species, is only the set of rules that evolved in the Equestria Girls universe, as well as our own, but it is perfectly logical to conclude that a universe with drastically different physical laws can exist. Or even does exist. Even one where, for example, the weather is controlled by the dominant sentient pony race, and magic is more prevalent and testable than electricity. Furthermore, this even explains the jarring similarity between the inhabitants of both universes, because the alterations in Equestria and Canterlot High were based primarily on the physics and dominant species, but the way in which each of these sentient creatures grew up, and who they are, did not differ that much at all. Thus, from the perspective of the My Little mythos, it makes perfect sense for there to be a parallel dimension where everything is subtly different in terms of physical laws and the species, because multiverse theory dictates that that possibility exists. Of course, this goes some way to suggesting the opposite, that it makes sense that an Equestria-style world filled with all of us as ponies, hopefully our OCs, but I digress, with magical powers actually could feasibly exist, which ironically enough was the subject of one of my previous videos, though I used a drastically different argument. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree multiverse theory adequately explains the existence of Equestria Girls, or are Canterlot wonder cults too unforgivable for you to believe exist? Either way, stay tuned for next week's Quantum Physics Part 2. Until then, though, this is Nightsphere the Gnostic. Goodbye.